Today I would like to show you a Bofuri deck that I'm having a lot of fun with against some of the current top tier decks. Now this deck was actually an attempt to create a control type deck in Weiss. Usually the closest Weiss can get to a control type deck is by setting up a huge board that is able to restrict your opponent's game plan, or by manipulating the amount of damage your opponent can push by negging soul. With Bofuri having so many weird tech cards, I figured it would be the best set to try something different with. It obviously has nothing to do with Bofuri being one of my favorite sets. So this deck is built around one specific card, namely the 2/1 Information Warfare Frederica. She has a climax combo on a stock soul that allows you to shuffle back an opponent's level 3 or lower character to their deck. Now this ability might be a bit simple at first glance, but it's actually a pretty fancy climax combo. There's no restriction as to what she can target, other than the character being level 3 or lower, which against like 90% of the sets in English Weiss will mean any character that's not hexproof. There's also no restriction as to where the character has to be when you target them, meaning that not even the back row is safe against this removal effect. The removal effect in and of itself is also a shuffle back mechanic, meaning that not only do we deny our opponents the chance to save their characters, we also decompress their current deck at the same time. Now I personally believe that this climax combo might be a bit overspec, but there are some awkward things that we need to work around. First, we always need multiples of her to resolve her climax combo. She then also has a top check condition that we cannot afford to whiff, but as long as the first one hits, the other ones will hit as well. Anyway, I'll quickly go over all the cards in the deck that I came up with, and then I'll discuss the general game plan and combos afterwards. At level 0 we run 4 copies of the Chaser. Now the Chaser is an amazing card against decks that run mostly utility zeros, while also playing around decks that like to set up tribe fields with a clean cut. We also run 1 copy of the Maple that gets plus 4k on defense, but she's mostly there for the on-demand mill. With 4 copies of the Chaser and 1 copy of the Maple, we have a total of 5 decent turn 1 plays. We have 4 copies of the Riki, which is our main yellow fix, and she can sometimes get strong enough to reverse characters at 0. We run 3 copies of the level 0 Sally, which is here to guarantee that our level 2 climax combo hits, and sometimes she'll plus you depending on how generous your opponent feels at the time. We also run 2 copies of the Maple Top Check Salvage X, which is an alternative to Top Check that doesn't let us manipulate the top deck, but does function as a hand fix and discard out. Rounding out our level 0 lineup, we have 2 copies of the Sally Brainstorm and 2 copies of the Meat Drop Search. At level 1 we run the Sally Gate combo that mills to an attack and salvages a character equal to or lower than the total milled level. Now most of the time this will let you salvage at level 0, which is why I personally don't mind running some odd ratios for cards at level 0 as we'll have enough chances to grab them. However, if you do mill to level 2 plus, then be sure to prep the Frederica. Then we also run 2 copies of the Trial Deck Kasumi and 2 copies of the Downsizer Maple and Sally. At level 2 we of course have 4 copies of the Frederica. We also run 2 3.5k backups and the Trial Deck Level Assist. These can help us a bit with both attack and defense, but they're mostly here to have more level 2s. At level 3 we have 4 copies of the Early Play Kanade, which serves as our healer, but he's also just a solid attacker during the mid game. Then we have 3 copies of the UEMA, which will serve as our quote-unquote finisher. The stock refund on this card makes it so we can be very flexible with how we spend our stock during the mid to late game. We then run 1 copy of the Maple stock swap, which is always good to have, and 1 copy of the Spawner Maple to allow for some more stock cheating while also providing an additional source of cancel burn. And of course for our climaxes you have the blue stock soul and the gate. The goal of this deck is to never lose a lane on offense without forcing at least a backup. Now this shouldn't be an issue at level 0 as the Chaser is 3.5k and the Riki can also reach up to 3.5k on offense depending on how many lanes we can reverse. At level 1 we have the level 1 climax combo Sally and the Trial Deck Kasumi, which can reach 8k and 8.5k power respectively when using the gate climax. Now these numbers are amazing to reach as they'll be able to outscale almost any cost 1 at level 1, sometimes even with a defensive power pump. At both level 0 and level 1 we can use the drop searches to neg minus 1k to make these numbers even more in our favor, while at level 1 we can start getting access to the Sally and Maple that can remove anything we cannot reach. With our level 1 climax combo we try to grab a Frederica whenever we can, otherwise focusing on our utility level 0s. Of course always assess the situation, and if you are low level 1 facing a standby deck for example, and thus not expecting to be pushed to level 2, you can opt to set up a second level 1 climax combo turn instead. At level 2 is where we start playing a bit more control-like. If your opponent has established a board, then look at how you can cause the biggest disruption to that board using our level 2 climax combo. Usually characters have some kind of power condition, and you should always check if removing enough characters will make other characters weaker. I'll show you an example using a strong board from Data Live. In this scenario, if you have access to 2 level 2 Fredericas, then we'd probably be forced to target the front row in most cases. The level 1 Maple and Sally can sometimes serve as a third climax combo, and the early play Kanade allows you to contest up to 11k. So depending on if we have these, we could target the board a bit differently. Now if we had access to 3 copies of the Frederica, then what we could do is shuffle back both the back row characters and one from front row, which now brings the 2-2 down to 7.5k and the 1-1 down to 6k, meaning we can now contest them with their climax combo. This is just an example, and of course stuff like backups or utility from our side can shift things in either player's favor. The difference between having that extra Frederica is pretty big, and I'd personally try to overextend to get that third copy in this situation. Now after our climax combo and successfully setting our opponent's game plan back, if the opponent manages to contest our Fredericas, then the best way to guarantee getting a new one is by just straight up stock encoring. Especially if we already have an extra stock soul in hand or a very high chance of drawing into it, I would always stock encore as many copies as I think are necessary. I honestly don't believe that many board based decks are actually able to come back from full board removal 2 turns in a row. If you have the level assist on board, then you can use her ability instead as a sort of delayed stock encore for at least 1 copy. Now if you're facing a deck that isn't necessarily board based, then you could start fielding 2 copies of the Frederica and keep going for back row snipes whenever you can. This extra -2 and the constant removal of utility tools might force our opponents to clock more, and it might set them back enough to not be able to contest your board. In this case, you don't need to climax combo again until they replay their back row or start playing their endgame. We can keep doing this until we hit level 3. Now at level 3 we have the super efficient UEMA that has the free stock refund if we have a full board, and the level 3 Maple spawner that allows us to cheat it out at 0 cost, meaning we only pay 1 stock for 2 finishers. Also keep in mind that the climax combo of Frederica is a shuffle back and in a sense can be used to push free damage in certain deck sizes. As such, she also serves as a finisher where you can open up lanes for bigger swings while also making your opponent's deck thicker. This could be very scary in conjunction with our cancel burns. Obviously this type of deck is pretty experimental, but I've been having a lot of fun and a surprising amount of success with it. Now there's a lot more depth to it than what I managed to fit in this video, but most of it is matchup specific stuff or possible deck alterations. If you do have any specific questions, then don't hesitate to leave a comment. Thanks for watching and I'll see you guys next time.